Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Coach's Corner University podcast. I am your host, Paul O'Need, and I am joined once again by Curtis Miller. Curtis was on the podcast a while back. Actually, I just remembered this. The first time you were on the podcast is when you publicly announced that your wife was pregnant, and
But
you are now a father.
that's right. That's right.
Congratulations, brother.
Thanks, man. I don't know if we had actually we hadn't announced it at that point.
That's right. Yeah.
Because I think I accidentally slipped up a little bit, but yeah, nobody listens to me talk, so they probably missed it anyway.
Well, only my mom listens to the podcast.
That's right.
So now we have my mom and like 6 other people now that it's been going for that long.
Yeah.
That's wild to think. Yeah, you were one of the first interviews we did.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, man. Yeah.
So today we're going to be doing a Q&A. So powerlifting Q&A. We've done a couple Q&A podcasts in the past. They're very well received. And I wanted to bring on a powerlifting coach who I personally respect to a very high degree to chat about a lot of the nuances involved with coaching. Also from, a personal perspective that vibes with mine, but also we disagree on a few things in a respectful manner. So we're going to discuss those today.
Yep.
The first thing, let's get the personal question out of the way, because I think no one gives a shit about us. So we'll get it out of the way first. What is one obstacle you overcame that was the hardest in powerlifting or in life?
We're getting right into it.
And
the crazy thing is nothing you experience powerlifting should amount to the things that you experience in life.
Agreed.
Now, with that being said, the biggest obstacle is continuing to show up and train when you have those other obstacles going on in life.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, whether it was things going on with health, whether it was things going on with family, relationships, whatever, never letting them really get in the way and sidetrack me from my goals and my path, my purpose. And it's easy to do. It's an easy cop out. Now I understand that other people go through really, really hard things in life, and you may have to take a step away from powerlifting, but either temporarily or forever, depending on what the situation is. But for me personally, everything that I've experienced was a reason for me to remember why training is so important. And to help get me through those times. I remember years and years ago when my uncle passed away, and I was extremely close with him. And when he was in the hospital, he was sick, and everybody was coming to visit him, and I was in college, and he told everybody to leave. He was tired of seeing everybody. He said, "The only person I want to see is Kurt." And he said, "So tell him to come visit me." And I never did. And he passed away a couple of days later.
Oh, shit.
And that really sucked. And, part of me is still upset to this day. However, I continue to go into the gym because it allowed me to just be with myself and, get through that situation. Mm-hmm. So the moral of the story is the most challenging thing I've ever done to help get me through those situations was continue to stay on track with my training and with my goals, regardless of what popped up. I've taken weeks off from training before. People think you can't take a week or two or a month off of training. And It's like, dude, you're not going anywhere. And the gym is not going anywhere.
Right.
And when you get back, you might be in a better place mentally than you were before you left.
Mm-hmm.
So understanding that you have to roll with the punches. Because, I can count, I don't have enough fingers to count the amount of people that I've seen come into powerlifting, say that they're going to do this and do that, and say that they're willing to do whatever it takes, and they come and go. Mm-hmm. They come and go faster than you can even realize it. And that's okay if that's what they want to do. But if you say that this is something you really want to do and nothing's going to get in your way, then don't let it.
Yeah, I echo that for sure. When you posed the question at the beginning, my first instinct was to say, well, nothing in training is hard compared to life. So in saying that, I've always viewed training as a means to build resilience so that I can handle the things in my life a little bit better.
Perfectly
So
said.
I use the lessons in the gym as a means to learn more about myself and deepen my ability to endure.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had, in the gym, the challenges that I faced. Yeah, I've torn muscles, I've had surgeries, but the gym was still the gym. I'm still going to show up. It wasn't a challenge for me to do that. Um, up until about a year ago, I'd never missed a training session for any reason whatsoever. That wasn't on purpose. And I mean, to this day, like, I've developed a lot more flexibility. I'm still training 4 days a week, but it looks a little bit different now. Training is training. The things that I've gone through in my life, man, like, probably too much to disclose on a podcast, but they've changed who I am as a person.
Mm-hmm.
And they've allowed me to, the lessons that I learned under a bar allowed me to endure those to a much higher degree. And there's so many parallels to be drawn between, the way that you make mistakes in the gym, you use the data, you reestablish a plan, you get back under the bar. It's the same shit in life.
The
So
exact same.
yeah. So I think that for me, I mean, Dave Tate wrote a book about it.
That's right.
Literally wrote a book, Under the Bar. And I remember reading that probably 15, 16 years ago.
First book I ever read.
Like first actual book you ever read?
First paperback book. No, first like training book that I read. Yeah.
Curtis is in bed as a toddler. His mom's reading him Under the Bar by Dave Tate.
Dude, I didn't read a book until I was 21 years old in college.
Stop.
No.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm glad that was a joke.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get into something a little bit more powerlifting related.
Yep.
Let's talk about. All right, let's get into the technique discussion. So,
Cool.
a lot of us over time develop somewhat of a robotic approach to lifting. And the way that I would classify that robotic approach to lifting is treating lifting the exact same way that you would a basketball player shooting a free throw. Every single effort has the same routine, the same timing, the same cadence, and you make that as repeatable over time. I think that's a big mistake a lot of young lifters make is they're quite lackadaisical in their warm-ups leading up to that top set and then ignoring technique on that top set for the sake of additional repetitions or additional load. When you're speaking with your lifters, how do you help them establish that routine?
Well, the biggest thing is I don't want to say you let them fail doing it the way that they are doing it,
Mm-hmm.
but that there is some value in that.
Yeah.
So when I'm coaching them and I'm watching their videos, I have them send me more videos than just their top set. So we can see how their sets progress as they're working up. And then maybe they'll comment something after a top set like, man, this just didn't feel right today and I don't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we go back to the earlier videos and we say, well, look at how you're approaching this lift. Maybe you're setting up under the bar and your eyes are wandering around in the gym and you're seeing who's trying to watch you. And, you unrack it without your back being tight and you get, in a rounded position. And then that's why your lift felt the way it did.
Right.
So you almost have to show them if you have the opportunity to do it. And then once you can say, when you climb under just the barbell, you have to lock it in. This is one of the best things that I ever gained from Ed Cohn when I first discovered him. And he still preaches it to this day.
Yeah.
It's whether it's the barbell or your max attempt, it has to be treated the same. You have to wiggle under the bar the same. You have to brace the same. You have to have your head, your steps coming out of the rack, your brace before you go down. Everything has to be identical. And it goes back to shooting a basketball. When you see somebody on the court and they're shooting a basketball, every single one looks identical. Unless you're Steph Curry and you're like throwing it from the fucking crowd over your shoulder, like that doesn't count. he's an outlier.
Right.
But it has to be the same, because if not, when you get to your top set or you get on the platform in a meet,
Mm-hmm.
the worst thing you can do is not take your warm-ups in the warm-up room with enough intent to prepare you for that opener on the platform, because that will dictate the rest of the day.
100%. 100%. I totally agree. The way that I go about structuring it is each lifter is going to have a different checklist of things that they need to go through before every attempt. So what I try to do is I try to narrow that checklist down to maybe 2 or 3 things that they have to think about. And their job within their setup is to go through that mental checklist during the setup before the unrack, and to the point where those 3 things are so locked in that they continue to establish that same routine set after set after set.
Mm-hmm.
So for myself, it's probably going to be a lot different than some of my lifters. Like on the squat, for me, I don't really think very much. It's just a very automatic lift for me. Whereas on the bench press, I have to go through a large mental checklist because it's not necessarily a natural lift. So for me, it's, traps into the bench. I keep my hips as high as I can as I set my feet. My unrack, I'm trying to press with my lats as I unrack the bar, which is a great cue from Paul Key. And then as I put my butt down, I'm letting that bar settle into me, and then I'm ready to go. And so if I get to that last point and every element of that checklist is checked off, all I have to do is bend my elbows.
That's right.
And that to me is the element of establishing that routine, is going through that checklist to the point where you get to that end point and all you have to do is that one thing. So on the bench press, bend your elbows. On the squat, bend your knees.
Yep.
On the deadlift, stand up.
Stand up. Yep. And here's the thing to kind of branch off of that is that checklist is something that a coach should always be expressing to their
Yes.
lifters. And if not, you are failing your athletes. I have found that depending on the experience level of the lifter, that depends on when they should go over that checklist in their head.
Mm.
I think everybody's different. I think you get to a point where, depending on the person, you either go through that checklist before you even walk up to the bar,
Okay.
or if you can manage it without going through paralysis by analysis, you can do it as you're setting up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've gotten to the point where with squat, I can go through the checklist in my head and it not have a negative impact on my ability to focus on the lift.
Mm-hmm.
Where at one time, maybe if I was doing that, it was taken away from my focus on actually performing the lift itself. Like sometimes you just have to focus on going down and standing up, and if you're focusing on too many things as you're going down, you forget to put your ass into the lift when you're coming up.
Yeah.
So, with deadlift, I tell a lot of my lifters, hey, when you're over at the chalk bowl, look at the bar. Look at the bar when you're chalking your hands and visualize your checklist before you go walk up on that platform.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you go up there, it's just second nature. Now, it takes some time to get to that point, right?
Yep.
But I think that when you think about your checklist, can change and maybe should change as you progress as a lifter.
I agree for sure. That brings us to the next question, which was, how do you balance technique, which includes your setup, with having aggression on the lift? And I think this is one where we kind of differed, because my immediate when we discussed the question, my immediate answer was, "Oh fuck, man, I can't be aggressive at all anymore." But you made an interesting point. So to my point, what do you say?
Yeah, I can go back and find videos of myself lifting where I'm screaming, walking up to the bar.
Mm-hmm.
And this is long, long time ago, and but I was lifting for different reasons back then. I was lifting to kind of get through pain.
The demons.
That's right. That's right. And those, they don't go away, but you realize that there's other things in life than, you know, maybe getting broken up with when you're 19 years old.
Right.
So it changes. And for me, I still have this internal, what I consider aggression
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to a heavy lift or a big lift or an important lift, whatever it is. But you may not ever see it on my face. And other times you may see me just like yell once, like, wake up, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that's me being aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it, I think that depends on. I see people lift with no facial expressions. I mean, I think you're that kind of lifter, right? Like, I don't think your face changes.
Not really. Yeah, I listen. I've gone through periods where I get really amped up, and I think like, okay, I'm gonna fucking destroy this bar, and everybody hates me, and I'm just not that person anymore.
Yeah.
I'm just not that person anymore. The one thing that I do not allow myself to do is be afraid. And I think a lot of the time people try to mask fear with aggression. And when you try to do that, it is a very unreliable thing.
Mhm.
We talk about, the science of arousal. There's that inverted U curve. And some people will have that curve shifted more to the right towards aggression. Some people will have that curve shifted more towards the left, towards calm. And for most people, it's actually that curve switches based on which lift they're actually performing.
You're exactly right. Yep.
For me, I cannot be too aggressive on a squat. Number one, because I don't really need to be. It's a very natural lift for me. But number two, I have to be fully in control because I'm handling very, very heavy loads for myself. And if I don't move correctly, that's where all my injuries have happened. So I have to be very, very conscious of my positioning, and I can't get too aroused that, shit goes out the window and I just dive bomb it because I'll probably die. Um, on the deadlift, well, my deadlift technique has changed a lot over time where now I only have like one or two cues that I have to think about, and I can just rip the bar off the floor.
Mhm.
So that's what I feel. I can get a lot more aroused for a deadlift than I can for a squat. On the bench press, probably a balance between the two where I still have a lot of technical cues that I need to keep a hold of, but I do lift a little bit better when I'm more hyped.
Yeah.
I bring this back to routine though, because I have pretty much the same routine for all the lifts. I'll belt up. I'll chalk my hands while I'm staring at the bar going through my checklist, like you mentioned. And then I'll breathe into my belt and let out like a little bit of a grunt. It sounds like I'm barking, but I'm not barking. Um,
It's
and one
okay.
day
It's okay if you're barking. That's fine.
I listen to a lot of DMX.
Yeah.
I'll let out that noise, and from then on, it's silence, and I just go lift weights.
Mhm.
But that little grunt is just my mental cue to get in the zone, and then I go lift the weights. There's nothing. There's no yelling. There's no like hyping up the crowd. There's nothing. It's just I'm just here to lift weights, man.
Yeah. Yeah. You're exactly
Um,
right. Yeah. I
the
think
yeah.
if I could put a spin on that, is I respect the hell out of that. I really do. For me, I think that I'm at that point now where I'm sure you are, that if you decide to step on the platform and compete,
Yeah.
it's not for shits and giggles.
No.
It's because you want to go out there and be better and do better than you have up to this point. And if you don't, then it's okay as long as you gave everything you had. So when I prepare for a meet now compared to when I prepared for a meet in the past, it means more to me in a way because I know that this may be getting close to my last one that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So that aggression that is internalized in me is an aggression of not being scared, but making sure and reminding myself why I decide to do this, and making sure that I give nothing less than 100% effort. And it's more of like an internalized wake the fuck up type deal, because I don't want you to hit this lift and then step off this platform and wish you would have given more.
Yeah. I think
And that's where mine comes from. Now, just real quick
yeah.
on how it relates to technique for any lifter, because everybody's different.
Mm-hmm.
You can yell or you can be completely silent. However, what's going on internally or externally should never come at the expense of changing your technique.
Agreed.
And I think that's the moral of what we're getting at, is you and I may take different approaches, but when you see us lift, it's that robot. It goes back to that robotic mindset and execution.
Yeah. I'll also make the point that, like, if you get so hyped up for every single lift, you will fatigue by the end of the meet. And that is something that is unique to powerlifting and strength sport, in that you have to manage your arousal, because you do have 9 maximal attempts throughout the day. So you don't need to be huffing ammonia for all 3 attempts for all 3 lifts. And, in training, you don't need to be hitting ammonia for all of your top sets. Like, these things actually do wear on your ability to recover. And if we're going to, like, let's save the gasoline, or let's, as to bring in a Fast and the Furious reference, you gotta wait to the last minute before you put on your nitrous.
That's right. That's right.
You want to be Dom sitting in there, be like, too early.
Yeah, that's right, man. It's like Dave always talked about flipping your ace card,
Yeah.
and like he said it, he was speaking on a different topic, but it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Like, would you rather use that ace card on your squat,
Mm-hmm.
or would you rather use your queens and your kings throughout the day and then save your ace card for your deadlift?
Right.
How many lifters have you seen peter out by the time the bar hits the floor?
Oh, I've done it a million times.
Well, yeah, that's unfortunate.
The key is I just have to have a big enough cushion after the squat
That's right.
that I can afford it.
And that's how those guys at Westside did so good.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
You would see them squat 1,000 and deadlift 600 pounds.
So let's continue this conversation on form, positioning. How, like, one thing that I am very big on is that there is no global manifestation of perfect technique.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that exists. What I do think is there are certain principles or axioms that need to be respected when you're looking at assessing the technique of a lifter. So, regardless of the lift that we're talking about, well, let's use the squat as an example, just because it's the first lift. It's also the most important one. No bias. You're going to want the shins vertical over the feet. You're going to want to make sure that the spine is neutral. You're going to want to make sure that the elbows are in line with the torso. You're going to want to make sure that your head is in a neutral position. That could vary so greatly based on the proportions of that lifter. I have someone in the back of my mind right now, one of my clients, Allie. She's a 123-pound female, but she's built like a spider. Like, she's all arms and legs. Her squat looks like a good morning.
Yep.
But it's because her limbs are so long. Mm-hmm. When she squats, yeah, she's way more bent over than any other person that I lift, that I coach, but shins are vertical over the feet, neutral spine, elbows in line, neutral head.
Yeah.
Great. Done.
But it's going to look completely different than somebody else with those same things, those same principles.
Exactly. So I'm really big on just focusing on, are we respecting biomechanics? Because at the end of the day, we're trying to lift in the most efficient manner possible. But what's most efficient for you with your proportions is probably not going to be most efficient. Like our deadlifts, for example, your back super neutral, your eyes a little bit more forward. Me, purposeful thoracic rounding, eyes almost straight at the floor.
Mm-hmm.
you deadlift like 60 pounds more than me. So maybe, there's
That's
something
it.
to be learned. What's your best pull?
782 in a meet and 805 in the gym.
So 782, my best lift in a meet, 725.
Oh, that's good math. That's good math.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, both of those things, our lower backs are both neutral. Our shins are stacked over our feet, right? Shoulders over the bar. I just have a really long fucking torso.
I
So
have a really short torso.
there you go.
And I think what it comes down to as a coach, and even as a lifter, if you don't have a coach, and this is where when I first started and didn't really have anybody working with me, and shit, YouTube wasn't even really a thing. The only person I saw deadlifting was like Pete Rubish at the time.
God.
Uh,
The washing machines in the basement?
washing machines in the basement. Yeah. So that's all you get to go by. And over time, you have to make small adjustments, but put yourself in the optimal position to use your strengths.
Mm-hmm.
And as a coach, that is your job. So when you look at a lifter like Allie,
Yep.
who's very long,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to understand that she probably doesn't have the strongest quads.
Right.
Like she probably has a pretty strong posterior chain,
Mm-hmm.
right?
She deadlifts over 400 at 123. Natural.
Exactly. Yeah. Hamstrings, glutes,
Yep.
back. So you don't want to try to get her to squat like an Olympic lifter.
Right.
You have to get her in the best position to squat to her strengths. And I think that's where I think some coaches go wrong, or they don't even care about it and they don't discuss it with their lifters.
Yeah, I think that's another conversation in that, like, I actually had this conversation with Andrew Locke. He was talking about limit lifts. And so for anyone who isn't familiar, a limit lift is like the all-time world record. So if you look at all-time world records, they are all perfect executions. Every single one. Because at limit weights, any power leak will fail your lift. Whereas a limit lift for you, like an absolute 1 repetition maximum, you can have some technique breakdowns. But once you get into that world class of weights that have never been lifted before, they have to be lifted perfectly. So the reason I personally harp on technique for the biggest reason is it puts a glass ceiling on your ability to progress. Because if you're lifting in a more efficient manner, you don't have to be as strong to lift as heavy weights because the weight's distributed over a larger surface area. As soon as you start having these power leaks, the surface area in which the load is applied shrinks, and then you have to be actually stronger.
That's right.
So,
and it's a balance, because I know plenty of lifters who focus solely on technique.
Yep.
And they don't allow themselves to push that limit and find out maybe what needs to be done next. Or, it has to be a balance. It has to be, hey, let's tune this up a little bit and then let's push it a little bit. Let's come back, let's tune this up and let's push it a little bit.
Yep. I totally agree. Okay, let's talk a little bit about assistance lifts, because the best way to improve your technique is to shore up those weak points within the physique that are causing the technique breakdowns. One thing that I see and that I actually harp on quite a bit on my social media is, number one, not having intent with your assistance lifts and just going through the motions. And number two, maybe choosing assistance lifts that don't have any direct carryover just because you like doing them. I'm big on the psychology of it. So if there are things that you hate doing, you're probably not going to put your full effort into it. But you also have to understand that if you're going to take that approach, you're probably going to not make as much progress as you could be making. But also understanding that if you're going to train your assistance lifts, train them with the same intensity, both from a relative and absolute perspective, as your main lifts. Go.
So, and this could be a whole nother conversation as well, but the downfall is of over specificity and too much frequency with competition lifts. If you have too much specificity and too much frequency, you don't leave enough time in the week for assistance work. And the competition lifts in doing them is developing the skill.
Right.
The assistance work, as it goes down in your program, the tier system, what's most important, they all build the next thing up.
Mm-hmm.
So your big assistance exercises are building your main lift.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have them in your program and you don't put the full intent into doing them, you're leaving so much on the table with the overall progress of your main lift itself. And how many times, I'm guilty of this. Going into the training session that you're going to have a very hard top set, or your main lift is going to be challenging that day. And then you go ahead and you get it done. So you come into the gym and you know that you're going to have a hard main lift.
Yeah.
And you hit it. And that was the only thing you were focused on that day. And you completely let off the gas pedal. And then you half-ass the rest of your workout. If you do that every training session, and you train 4 times a week over the course of 12 months, over the course of how many years, and you have that mindset, how much are you leaving on the table to be able to progress yourself as a lifter?
Yep.
If anything, that assistance work, when you get done your main lift, you have to go into the assistance exercise and be like, now it's fucking time to get down to business.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what's going to build the main lift.
One thing that I think a lot of people make the mistake of on assistance lifts is prioritizing load over anything. And this is a mistake that I've made. It's a mistake that I see a lot of lifters make. Your goal in the assistance lift should remain the goal, right? So if the goal in the assistance lift is to build tolerance to positions, improve tissue resilience, and build tissue, those are all goals that require a high proximity to failure. You're going to have to train very close to failure. You do not have to use the heaviest load possible in order to achieve failure. If you train with a high level of intent, you maximize tension, tempo, positioning. You can actually train much lighter than you think you need to while still providing a phenomenal stimulus. And that has 2 things that benefit you. The first is you don't need to do a tremendous amount of volume on the assistance lifts if you're training at a high proximity to failure. And number 2, because you're not using heavy loads from an absolute perspective, it takes less of your recovery away from those main lifts. So when people get programs from me and they're like, oh, 2 sets of rows?
That's right.
I'm like, yeah, just wait till you do those 2 sets to failure, how sore you're going to get, especially when we're using tempos, especially when you're using isometrics in that stretched position. This is going to expose you to a whole new level of, abilities that you never leveraged before. And once they get into that, they're like, oh, I have so much more energy on my main lift. And then I don't have to worry about loading these assistance lifts because I can train them close to failure and I don't have to go very heavy. And to me, that's when we talk about concurrent periodization, to me, that's the best way to go about it because you don't want to take away from the main lift. You want, as you mentioned, the tier system. You want to build what's above.
Please try again.
Hey, Siri, shut the fuck up. Yeah. So we're trying to build our main lift with that assistance.
Exactly.
And that to be the best way.
Exactly. And a guy at the gym a few weeks ago who I highly respect as a lifter and a coach got done his main lift and he decided to jump in and do his assistance work and his accessories with somebody else that day. And they were doing some heavy split squats, like heavy Bulgarian split squats. And they ended up doing 3 sets, but each set was not that heavy, but almost to failure.
Mm-hmm.
and he got done and had to go to the bathroom because he was almost about to throw up.
Nice.
And he was like, man, I never do my split squats quite, where I push myself that hard. And you don't have to, but if it gets to a point where split squats, pushing yourself on split squats is ruining the rest of your training session, then we need to evaluate how we're approaching our training sessions during our assistance work and our accessory work.
Well, in that situation, I would say that guy's grossly out of shape and he's stopped being a fat piece of shit. So.
And think about how that affects going into meet day.
Oh my God. Oh, there are way too many fat pieces of shit in this sport, man. Did I say that out loud? I think I did.
I didn't hear anything.
Okay. All right. Okay. As you progress, obviously from being a beginner to being an intermediate, as a coach, what do you think is the biggest, maybe 3 things that you need to transition your mindset from as you progress in your lifting journey from beginner to intermediate, and then maybe from intermediate to advanced?
Yeah. So is this coming from a lifter standpoint or from a coach?
As a coach, you're coaching someone through their lifting journey.
Okay. So in my opinion, there's not a ton of difference between beginner and intermediate, but to get from intermediate to advanced is fucking hard.
That's a big jump.
Because I think intermediate and the strength and the performance associated with that group is a majority of what you see in powerlifting.
Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
And the things that the beginner to intermediate needs to remember is that this is about them, and they have to focus on themselves, because you cannot get caught up in what people who've been doing this for 10, 15 years are doing with their training.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to stay in your lane, and that's really hard these days. So continuing to work with your lifter and telling them, hey, this is where a coach is really valuable, because communication and relationship building has to be the first thing on your checklist when you start working with a client, in my opinion. Because if it's not there, it's never going to be there. It's not something you can gain down the road.
Agreed.
So continuing to start off on the right foot and let them know, hey, these are the things that we need to focus on. Now, those things, in my opinion, are establishing proper execution on lifts,
mm-hmm.
which can be very hard because a novice lifter is going to want to put the gas pedal down. So you have to give them those wins where they can push themselves, but also keep reminding them and making sure that their programming is centered around quality movement so they can continue to build strength and progress as you go.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is going to be consistency. I mean, I cannot tell you how many people that I've seen who start off and they're, all in. And then maybe one thing doesn't go their way, or something, they get sidetracked somehow and they fall off for a little bit, or they change their mindset to where maybe they're not focused during their training sessions throughout the week. And it's a constant up and down battle of progress.
Mm.
So understanding that you're not always going to be super motivated when you go into the gym.
Yep.
Life is going to kick you in the dick, and you may not even want to go into the gym, but you have to.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to check the boxes. You have to walk in with whatever you have in you to give that day. So focusing on good technique and execution,
mm-hmm.
Being consistent with your training, and in my opinion, just pushing hard, lifting hard and figuring out what hard actually means. Not saying, man, I just did this set and it was I did tricep extensions and I could only do one more rep and that was really fucking hard. It's man, I want you to take yourself at least one time during the training session out into deep water and do something that maybe you didn't think you could do.
Yeah. I'm going to answer. I just have to pee really bad.
Yeah.
So the way I think about this is we need to be very careful about how we classify beginner, intermediate, advanced. I think most people will have that classification based on lifts, like the number that you're lifting. Now that we're having more people competing in the sport, you're going to have a lot of very beginner lifters with very high numbers. And so when I think about the difference between a beginner, an intermediate, and an advanced, as a beginner, you're still trying to figure out what works for you. When you are trying different things, when you are learning about yourself, we're going to learn about effort. We're going to learn about intensity. We're going to learn about what movements feel natural, what don't. You're also going to learn where you tend to break down. As an intermediate, you're getting a better idea of what works for you, and you're learning how to refine that approach. And as an advanced lifter, because I think you can be an advanced lifter while still having shitty numbers, you're just if that's the case, it's probably just not a sport that you are predisposed to being very good at, and that's okay. But as an advanced lifter, you know exactly what you need to do to build your lifts. All you need is time. So through the whole process, I'm thinking, okay, what do I need to do in order to be successful? I'm trying a number of different things. I'm figuring out what I actually enjoy, what I don't enjoy. I'm figuring out what sort of programming I take best to. I'm learning about if I'm the coach, I'm trying to dial into the psychology of that lifter and what makes them tick. As we get into that intermediate stage, I'll give you a perfect example. So I have a lifter I started with when he was 18 years old. He's now 20. He went from squatting 500 to squatting 705. He's still a beginner.
Yeah.
He's still a beginner because we're still trying to figure out exactly what builds his lifts. We're to that stage now where we're transitioning to that intermediate stage where mostly because he's done puberty and his body has stopped changing. But now we're dialing into the refining the process. How many times a week he needs to be benching, how many times a week he needs to be squatting, how many times a week he needs to be deadlifting, where we fit in his assistance lifts, what part of his physique needs the most attention on the assistance work. And this kid will be a world champion. I'm telling you right now. But his best asset is he knows how to work hard and he doesn't get bored.
Yeah.
His program, I think there was like 26 weeks in a row where his program was exactly the same. I just undulated between 3s and 5s and added 2.5 pounds every week.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
Yep.
He loved it.
Yep.
He would show up, he would do exactly what he was told, and he would leave. I managed his progressions based on trying to keep it between an RP 7 or 8. Anytime I got to a 9, I would back him down. And we would just repeat the progression. And anyone who would look at that program not knowing this kid, like, that's a terrible program. But in my mind, I'm like, this is a really good program because it's fucking working.
That's right.
And for me, the the mindset of that person as the coach, you need to dial into the mindset of that person and figure out what sort of approach can we have and be consistent with for a really, really, really long period of time. And I'm not talking months, I'm talking years. Because no one is an advanced lifter within the first 10 years, in my opinion.
Yep.
And I'll even put it to you further. I took 3 years off from powerlifting. I would consider myself to be a beginner again.
Mm.
And the hard part about it is I'm really fucking strong. But I'm too strong for my technique now.
Gotcha.
So everything has to be slowed down. Everything has to be regressed. Like my third session in wraps 2 weeks ago, I squatted 727. I was fucked up after that. And that's 100 pounds below my best ever.
Right.
But that's 100 pounds below my best ever. My third time in wraps after 3 years off.
Yeah.
So I'm a beginner again. I got to figure out what I need to do to keep this train moving in the right direction without blowing myself up.
Well, your body changed a lot during that time, focusing on bodybuilding too.
I'm pretty sexy now.
Yeah. Things change. You add muscle in different areas, and maybe your leverages change a little bit, and you got to kind of refine those things now.
100%. Okay, let's take it to something that you've alluded to a number of times in this conversation, and I think it's the perfect segue into this next question. Let's talk about flexibility in programming, because no one is a professional powerlifter. And this is one where I'm like, man, if you told me that 10 years, let's say, 8 years ago, I'm like, go fuck yourself. I'm a pro lifter.
Yeah.
I'm like, no, still had a full-time job, still had other things to do. Talk to me about flexibility. How do you balance that with someone who has really big goals? How do you pull them back?
All right. So I'm going to give you 2 examples of 2 clients who lift around the same numbers and are around the same size.
Okay.
Different builds, but around the same weight class. One of them trains 5 days a week. The other one was training 3 days a week. Both female lifters. What are we told all the time is that females need more frequency.
Right.
Females need more volume. They need more everything. Well, this one client, she had a background in MMA and Muay Thai.
Okay.
She was also a really high-level athlete in high school. And what I learned through working with both of them is that the one client who started at 5 sessions a week and we had to work down to 3, she was able to give so much to each rep of each set, of each exercise, of each training session, that it was taking longer for her to recover from session to session. And she could, when she walked into the gym, it was the only thing that mattered in the world for that 1.5 to 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to give absolutely everything and make the most out of each training session, to where when we dropped her down to 3 times a week, in those other days, she could focus on being a professional, being a wife, being a daughter, being a friend. It allowed her to get more out of all of those things and kind of like make herself whole. So that when she did go train and when she did go compete, she could give all of herself to that.
Love that.
Now, the other client is so strict, has her whole day mapped out. Kind of reminds me of you, like second she wakes up, she has her coffee breaks on her calendar, right?
Okay. I send my wife Google invites for intimate time.
Exactly. Now, she has everything so dialed in that she can train more and continue to make progress. So, in my opinion, as a coach, you have to be able to read that.
Mm-hmm.
I can't give them both the same program and expect both of them to progress the same.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to over time read your clients and how they're responding to the training. And there are still, even though their programs are different, there are still many different variables and aspects of each program that are very similar.
Mm-hmm. I think that those two examples perfectly illustrate how you have to find what's right for the person. And whether you're a coach or whether you're a lifter, that's going to vary, number one, based on the time in your life, number two, based on the period of training that you're in, and the emphasis of that training block. For me, I really love training 5 days a week. I love being in the gym. The problem is as soon as those weights climb up, I can't train 5 days a week because I can't
Mm-hmm.
recover from it. It was actually funny. Liv and I were walking the other day, and I was like, maybe I should drop to 3 days a week. Like, and she's like, that would probably be good for you considering how hard you train. And I was like, I never really thought about it like that because training with intensity for me is second nature. Something I've just always done. I've always trained very hard. But I'm going to be 37 this year. I have so much more external stress with building the business. My days are absolutely packed. And while I do value that 2-3 hour period where I can step away from the business, focus on myself, at some point that does stop serving me. And that ability to have conversations with your clients around what's truly important to them. And I think Chad Ikes does a fantastic job communicating this in that what's the goal? Is the goal to set a PR at the meet? Well, then your job is to manipulate the training in a way where you set the biggest PR possible. And if that means training less, that means training less.
Mm-hmm.
If your goal is to do a bodybuilding show and to showcase the best physique possible, well, you need a higher frequency of exposure to weight training because your calories are so low and you need to retain muscle mass. So training a little bit more often in that 5 days a week range is probably going to serve you better. So as long as you keep the goal, and remember that there are things outside of lifting weights that are important to you. And this is something most beginners, they're usually students, they're not married, they may have a significant other, but they don't have any kids. They don't have much outside of the gym that is taking away from their recovery capacity. I'm going to all but guarantee your training now as a father of a 2.5-week-old is drastically different than it was maybe a month ago.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that you stop making progress.
You're right. Because you learn efficiency.
You learn efficiency, you learn about effort, and you also learn about what the training needs to be for you right now. None of us are professional powerlifters. Very few of the people that are going to listen to this are professional bodybuilders. So my wife's going to listen to it and it's going to be posted after next weekend. She's going to be a fucking pro after next weekend.
That's
but
right.
We have to realize that this should be something that feeds into your life and allows you to hit goals. And there's a lot of different roads to Rome here.
That's right.
So I think that was a phenomenal one. So let's finish off with a question that I think we'll both have. You'll have a more serious answer to it, and I'll have a less serious answer to it. But Curtis, how do I stop obliterating my thumbs when I pull hook grip?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is like, what do you do? What do you do for a living? And like, what have you done with your life up to this point? Because although some of it is technical,
Mm-hmm.
some of it is just having like tough fucking hands.
Right.
My transition into hook grip was very easy because at that point in my life, I was working construction and I was swinging a sledgehammer every day.
Right.
So when I went into the gym, there was no way I was getting blisters because my hands were just calloused.
Right.
With that being said, when I got into this profession, I became a keyboard warrior.
Welcome.
Yeah. With that being said, my hands have gotten much less conditioned to doing physical labor. And when that happened, I did realize that, oh shit, maybe I need to adjust how I'm holding the bar on hook grip to avoid obliterating my hands. And the biggest thing is, I see a lot of people who have their thumb wrapped around the bar. And that's going to put all the pressure on this really soft pad of your thumb, and you're going to get blister after blister after blister.
Okay.
It needs to be running parallel with the bar. So if this is the bar and my thumb is underneath and I'm about to lock it in, instead of wrapping it around the bar like this, I need to run it with the bar like so that the pressure is actually on the outer part of your thumb as opposed to the pad of your thumb. And when you do that, you find that the hook grip is actually locked in harder because essentially you're just making your thumb a part of the bar. And when people wrap it around, I think that's when a lot of people lose a hook grip too. If you have a hook grip locked in correctly, unless your hands are really big, like fingers are really sausage fingers. Like I've seen people and I've worked with people who have the hook grip locked in perfectly, but their fingers are just not built to be able to hold it. Like I have pretty skinny fingers, so it's a little easier for me.
I've got pretty meaty hands, so I've never been able to actually set a hook. But at the same time, I very much dislike the hook grip. I think it's stupid for a few reasons. I'm not just being a smart ass, because part of me is just like, just build your fucking grip and pull mixed. It's really not that hard. But the reason I don't like hook grip, especially for a conventional deadlifter, is because the breakdown in a conventional deadlift is going to likely be in your upper back or through your lats.
Yep.
And when you are pulling hook as a conventional deadlifter, you cannot take advantage of irradiation, meaning that you cannot squeeze the bar. In fact, quite the opposite. You're trying to actively not squeeze the bar when you're pulling hook. Right. So I think you lose a lot of lat tension. So for me, I would just train your grip and learn how to hold a bar with a mixed grip. And if you are hell-bent on pulling hook, learn how to set your hook properly and then do everything possible with a hook grip to condition your thumbs. I've even, like, there's stories of like Russian lifters hitting their thumbs with hammers and like random shit to make your thumbs numb. But I think the more things that you do to protect your thumbs from being hurt, the more they are going to hurt when you end up pulling hook grip.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And the last thing that I'll say about it is, I think hook grip is superior from a grip standpoint, but mixed grip
if you have bitch hands.
Right. But mixed grip is superior from a absolute tension standpoint.
Right.
You are going to be much more locked in with the bar through your body, in my opinion, with a mixed grip than you are with a hook grip. And if you plan on being a conventional deadlifter with hook grip, you need to make sure that you have a really fucking strong back.
Oh yeah.
So that you don't turn into a fishing pole with a sea bass on the end of it after you pull the bar.
That was a very Midwest example. You've been living in Pittsburgh too long.
I don't even know if they have bass out here. I don't know what's out here, but the moral of it is, if you're going to pull hook grip, make sure it's for the right reason.
Yeah.
Don't just do it because you see some really good lifters doing it. If you have a torn bicep and maybe it forces you to switch hook, or maybe you're windmilling because you have a pec issue or imbalance, then there's two options. Balance it out, or if you're
switch your hands,
switch your hands. Or if you're too lazy to do those, then sure, pull a hook grip. But make sure you have a purpose behind doing it.
Yeah, I agree. Dude, this is really great. This is a great conversation. A lot of golden nuggets. I appreciate you joining me once again. You're always welcome on the podcast.
All right. Same time next week?
Yeah, sure, man.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thanks, Paul.
My pleasure. So I'll have links to where everyone can find Curtis and Ironbound Strength in the show notes. Any parting words of wisdom, my friend?
Listen to Coach's Corner and Polo Need podcast because there's really good nuggets in them. And for all the 6 lifters plus Paul's mom, thank you.
This has not been a paid advertisement. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Please make sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. And we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks, Curtis.
No problem, man. Thank you.